Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm real proud to be right here in your town. You know, this is the best crowd I've had all year. I'm sorry your wife drug you here. Going down south, going in around, going to Florence, having fun. Going down south, going in the world, going down south, gonna see my girl. Well, before we can start this show, there's a few things you need to know. Did you remember to silence your phone? Go ahead, I'll wait. And the bathrooms are located in the back. Please remember to wash your hands. Wash your hands, keep them dry, and remember to zip your fly. Now who's that guy up on the stage? Where's he from and what's his name? His name is Sean, he's from the South, and all he does is run his mouth. Will this show be very long? What's the point of this dumb song? I mean, does this guy have any class? Or is he just a horse's? Music was always very important in my life when I was a kid. Music and the spoken word. I loved to listen to them preachers in my church when they could deliver a fire-breathing sermon that would make the hair on your neck go. I loved to read stories too. I always told my mother, I said, Mama, When I grow up, I want to be a writer. She said, son, you can't do both. Well, the music was really important to me, and so I focused on music. Now, the only music in my life when I was a child came in the form of my father's Philco radio. The transistor radio sat on top of his refrigerator, which he kept out in the woodshed, because we were Southern Baptists. And all Southern Baptists keep their refrigerator in the woodshed. I'm glad you laughed at that, because that tells me we have some Southern Baptists in the room. Now, I was really worried, because I was told when you come up to this part of Alabama, you have mostly Presbyterians. Yes, well, I'm glad to say that I love Presbyterians. I really do. Like my daddy used to say, son, a Presbyterian is really just a Southern Baptist who wants to drink but can't afford to be Episcopalian. And I love Episcopalians, I really do. They're very spiritual people. Wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, there's a 5th. But you know, my mother, as a Deepwater Baptist, had the hardest time with the Methodists. She'd say his name was not John the Sprinkler. He did not march people out into the middle of the River Jordan only to douse their forehead with 1 tablespoon of water and a wet wipe. Now, the reason I bring this up tonight is because if I could just help but save 1 Methodist. Well, the truth is, my mother would go to any church that would open the doors. It didn't matter which denomination it was. She would go to any church, and she'd take me with her. This is why we love when we refer to my mother as a Presbyterian Methodicostal terrier. Well, the music out my daddy's woodshed was beautiful. We'd sit out there on a Saturday night, and we'd listen to the grand old uproar. And we'd listen to Minnie Pearl come out on the stage, and she'd say, howdy! And everybody in the audience would say, howdy! Well, I'm just so proud to be here. Minnie, you came a long way to be here from grinding the switch tonight. Yeah, I know it, but I'm just so proud to be here. You know, I learned something today. What'd you learn, Minnie? When I was walking into the Grand Ole Opry tonight, I learned that I was cool. You're cool, really? Well, how do you know that? She said, well, as I was walking up the steps, I heard 2 men over talking, and they said, Minnie Pearl's here tonight. The other man said, yeah, I know it. I've seen her before. She ain't so hot. Oh, I love to listen to that beautiful voice of Minnie Pearl coming through that microphone. And I love to listen to the music, the steel guitars, and the twin fiddles, and Roy Acuff and the boys taking it to town. Yes, my dad and I listened to that Grand Ole Opry every single Saturday. And whenever my mother would come out to the woodshed, my dad would get up real quick, and he'd change the channel real quick, and it'd get to a religious station. He'd, just give me that old time religion. Give me that old time religion. Give me that old time religion. It's good enough for me. It was good for Paul and Silas. It was good for Paul and Silas. It was good for Paul and Silas. It's good enough for me. When my mother would leave, he'd get up and change it back and be, there's a tear in my beer. Oh, yes. I used to love it. And I'd look at that refrigerator sitting atop that refrigerator, and I'd point and I'd say, Daddy, one day, that's going to be me. He'd say, son, if you practice real hard, one day you too will have your own beer refrigerator. Well, the other place that I had music in my life came from that 27-member Baptist church way out in the sticks. We were Deepwater, free will, primitive, independent Baptists who had no free will at all. 27 members in our congregation. And the musical talent in a 27-member congregation, I want to tell you, runs very, very slim. Okay, the way we chose our music every single week was as follows. Brother Hootie's wife would get up onto the platform and she would sing, "He Touched Me." And she would sing this while looking directly at Brother Hootie. Which was weird. Well, a new system was enacted by Sister Dolores, the preacher's wife. The preacher's wife came up with a brand new system wherein you would walk into the vestibule, you would write your name down onto a little yellow legal pad. You would turn that name off, you roll it up in a little tube, and you place it into a fedora hat. You had to have one song memorized in your brain. That hat would then go passed down the pews all the way to the front pew where Sister Dolores sat. She would reach into that hat, root around, and she'd withdraw a name, and she'd say, "So-and-so, come on down." It was like the heavenly Price is Right. Well, now, I had never been called upon, not once, because every time I walked into church, I wrote down my mama's name. But one Sunday, as I walked into church, I sat down in that front pew next to my cousin Ed Lee, and cousin Ed Lee was laughing something fierce. He had his hand covering his face. He was plumb leaning over. His face was cherry red. That little squiggly vein in his forehead was poking out. I said, "What are you laughing at?" He said, "Man, you see that hat coming down the aisle?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "There's 27 names in that hat with your name on it." I said, "Who would do such a thing?" He said, "Your mama." And I watched that hat go down the aisle. And I watched Sister Dolores reach inside, root around, good and long. And she withdrew her name and she said, "No." She reached in again. She "No." Well, Sean Dietrich, come on down. I stood up in my own pew. I looked around at all of God's chosen people. Now, I was not graced with a lot of confidence. I began to walk down the aisle, very self-conscious of myself. Now, I was not a beautiful child. I was born with corkscrew curly red hair. I had buckshot freckles. I had 2 ears that looked like a Ford F-150 driving down the road with both doors open. And I was chubby. Yes, I was very, very, very chubby. I was so chubby that my mother had to purchase my school clothes at Sears. Now, I don't know if many of you know this. If you don't, if you grew up with people calling you names, like Beanpole, you lucky devil. There was a brand of clothes at Sears for little boys who could not fit into traditional Levi's. This brand of clothes, I can still see it when I close my eyes. It's in the back of the Sears, to the left of the dressing rooms, to the right of the electric chair. This brand of clothes was called I'm among friends. Now, they had 2 styles of pants, at least back in my day, 2 styles. They had jeans. Now, the jeans came complete with a paper patch above your right cheek. In bold impact writing, it said on the patch, just in case there was any doubt. Now, the second kind of pants they had was corduroy. Now, corduroy, if you were a child with an insufficient thigh gap, could start a fire. They can hear you coming from a mile away. Zit, 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 zit. Now to make matters worse, my mom would take me back into the dressing room. She'd get them pants and she'd unfold them. And she'd put one foot in one pant hole, one foot in the other. And she'd grip the waistband and she'd go, like trying to get a big old king-size pillow into a little teeny pillowcase. Then she'd get the button in the waistband and she'd pull it tight and she'd button it. Then she'd lift up my shirt tail and expose my white muffin top. And she'd get her mouth and go. I was 15 years old. As I walked down the aisle, zip, 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 I got to the stage and I looked out at all 27 of God's chosen people. We were all first and second cousins. I mean, my daddy used to say, son, you don't come from a family tree. You come from a family wreath. And if you didn't laugh at that, you come from one too. I looked out at all them people and I looked at my mother particularly and she went, I had no idea, no earthly idea what my song was supposed to be. I was standing up there looking out at everybody. I could feel my heart beating in my throat. I looked over at Sister Betty Lynn, who played the Mason and Hamlin grand piano. She'd been in our church ever since Sherman marched through. And she went, and across from Sister Betty Lynn was Sister Lynn Betty. They both wore hearing aids with pendants around their neck that controlled the volume, with batteries that ain't been changed since Herbert Hoover was in office. She played the 14 horsepower Hammond organ, and she went, folks, I was sick, and I closed my eyes. And the Spirit of God took over in me. And I said, say, hey, good looking. How's about cooking something up with me? My mother had to be revived with cold water. I got a hot rod for that $2 bill. I know a spot right over the hill. There's soda pop and dancing's free. So if you want to have fun, come along with me. Say, hey, good looking, what you got cooking? How's about cooking something up with me? Now normally when I travel